don't run away, don't tune it off, and definitely don't overreact just from the topic alone. But let's try and discuss this in a somewhat civilized and somewhat all-encompassing manner. It's the topic that just keeps on giving in probably many bad ways when it comes to sports and politics. But that is not even an exception for Auburn sports, as has been the case not quite often, but a few times it has reared its ugly head when it comes to coaches and maybe even some players sometimes. But do they belong together? And should coaches, players, those that are involved with these things that we love, that we try to escape with, be involved with it? That's what we want to talk about here today on Ever to Podcast, which is our short form audio and visual series where we talk about the things that are prevalent in the Auburn family spectrum, the news items, the rumors, the topical discussions that are prevalent at this time. And whether you're watching live on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast format, we appreciate you being here and hope that you'll subscribe on both, if not one or the other that you choose, so you can stay up to date with these episodes, but also the other content that we have on each of those different formats. This topic, I'll be honest with you, it was a little bit worried on my part to even broach this particular topic because I know how divisive it is, and I know how polarized our society is right now. But part of that polarization is because we don't talk about these things and discuss them and actually ask the questions of, should we believe these certain things or should we take these certain sides, and not actually just hash it out as human beings. I'm not talking about Twitter posts, because any Joe Blow can do that and have some snappy, quick comment that they'll never say to someone's face. And obviously, you could probably make that case here with me on a YouTube channel, especially just in front of a video. I mean, obviously, you guys can comment on it, but there's no general back and forth in front of each other's face type interaction. But I hope you guys at least appreciate that's what my hope is here today, is that we can have some semblance of a holistic conversation about this particular topic and how this relates to Auburn, because we are taking somewhat of a broad spectrum approach to this topic of sports and politics. If you ask the general fan, I think most of them will probably say they prefer for politics to stay out of sports, even for Auburn sports. They just want it to be an escape. And I think there is some validity to that. I do think that it is something that people want to be separate from the other harsh things of life. But as most things are, it's an all-encompassing thing in our lives, and frankly, the athletes, the coaches, the other entities that are involved in sports, from their lives, it bleeds into that part because it's part of their lives too. So when you kind of take that holistic look, it's understandable for it to be frustrating, but it's also understandable for it to be there as well. But what sometimes I think is the problem, frankly, for me, is when we're hypocritical on both sides of the equation. And that's what I want to talk about today and how it relates to us as the Auburn family and those that are involved with the Auburn family. Because sometimes I think this conversation are those people that maybe aren't necessarily part of the Auburn family, but at least want to weigh in on what's going on at Auburn, whether those be journalists, we'll just call them that, or other entities that want to have a say and have their voice heard on a particular topic. So what we're referencing is, as of late, Bruce Pearl has come out on social media and voiced some opinions. It's not the first time he's done that. It's not the last time that he'll do that. And whether you agree or disagree, it's one thing to think, both of those ways, right? You can agree with what he says or disagree with what he says. But I really think it comes down to a couple of questions. Can they share their opinions? And should they share their opinions? And I want to talk about that, but let me put some more context around the situation. We all know what's going on in our country. It's pretty much been the entirety of our country's time, but it feels like it's more so with the prevalence of social media, the polarization of politics, and social media, especially, everybody wants to share their opinions about it, as we've already addressed. With the current administration, I think it's a fair statement to say things are not going as planned, that a lot of people that voted for him wanted it to happen. And I also think it's a fair statement to say that maybe it's not as bad as people on the other side want to say that it is. Now, listen, for me personally, I'm going to try to keep my side of those type of issues out of this equation. You don't have to search hard or really read into what I say too hard to figure out where I line up on all these things, but that's not really the point here. We're really talking about this effect of politics and sports and how it pertains to Auburn sports. Well, Bruce Pearl today chose, after President Joe Biden decided to get off and tout how his economy is better in some aspects than others, and put some information out there that I think you probably, if there were fact checkers actually doing their job in fact checking, they'd probably say, it's a little misleading. It's a little probably picking and choosing exactly what you need to say, which in fairness, I think anybody, and listen to how you can talk about sports. You're a college coach trying to sell your program. You're going to pick and choose exactly what you want to sell. So this isn't, something that's completely foreign to just politics or things like that. Well, Bruce Pearl expressed what I thought was a very, I won't even call it a passionate, but a very not emotion filled, because I think it was reasonable, the things that he said on there. Now, I read it once. I probably just read it in the one context of the situation. So it'd probably be helpful to go back and read it several times to see if there's anything else I can catch out of it. But when I read his response, I didn't see anything necessarily wrong with it, nothing outrageous, nothing, just simply calling for more transparency and calling for being a little bit more honest about what's actually going on. Bruce Pearl is also, and if you want to kind of use this as well, taken to social media to talk about issues as it pertains to Israel and Palestine, which is a whole nother can of worms we can open up. And Bruce Pearl has a very strong connection with the Jewish faith and the Jewish people. And while I don't know Bruce well enough to know exactly how all that fits into his life story and all that, I'm not going to dive into that. This is not the first time that he's delved into things that could be quote unquote politically controversial. So the question at hand, can he do that? Well, absolutely he can, just like any of you can. Anybody's got a social media account. Well, those that they will let have them and have a voice. That's a story for another day. You can. You have amendment rights that allow you to have freedom of speech, and there are things that sometimes probably shouldn't be said, but you have the right to do so. So the question of, can he do those things? Absolutely. So there's no discussion. There's no debate on this. The real question is, should Bruce Pearl, should a Auburn coach, and if you want to extend that even further, should an entity involved with the sports use their platform to engage into the political spectrum? I think that's a healthy debate to have, and one that I think we should all have together. Not just me talking to you, but you should have it with people not in your echo chamber, but people that oppose you. I often think that if you're going to make a comment about something on social media, you better talk about it with somebody in person that's the opposite side of you. And that actually proves whether you believe what you actually claim you're talking about or not. Because if you're not willing to engage with the other side peacefully, then you actually don't really care. You just want a reaction. You just want a like. You just want a retweet. And all that kind of stuff that comes with putting snappy things on social media or out sound bites out on the internet and things like that. I think the question of should Bruce Pearl, should an Auburn coach engage in these things, it's different for everybody, and I think it's different for each coach and what they're trying to accomplish right now. For instance, should Brian Harsin at this moment engage in those type of things? Considering the offseason that he went through, probably not in the best interest. Bruce Pearl, on the other hand, has got a guy who's doing very well as a head coach, as a program builder. Feelings are pretty good. There's probably a little bit of collective leeway to get away with a few of those things and have your say and there not be too much blowback. But there's definitely some of that at play. The question is, should they, in terms of, is it productive, is it healthy? Well, you could probably make a case that it's probably not productive in some formats, right? Obviously, there are players that are coming to play for you that probably have a variety of different belief systems, and do you run the risk of ostracizing them? Moreover, do you run the risk of ostracizing recruits that potentially would see you, but they see you doing these things online? Would that push them away? Maybe some. It's kind of the same conversation that we have about uniforms and those, like, just the gimmicky things that athletic programs do sometimes. Do they really make the biggest difference in somebody coming? Probably not, but do they at least make them stop and think, and could they be a contributing factor? Probably so. So I think negating its negative effects is not being completely honest, but I think also saying that that's what's kept someone away is not being realistic as well. And I think that's what I try to do in a lot of these things is weigh both sides of the issue and realize, as we talk a lot here on this channel, especially our live streams, when we talk about controversial things in sports, especially Auburn sports, it's usually not the side that you think it's on. It's never really over here or over here. It's somewhere in the middle. There's context and there's emotions, and somewhere it meets in the middle to form a reality. Should Bruce Pearl do this? Well, I think it also informs how passionate Bruce Pearl is about this. He's a smart guy. He's also a very passionate guy. And for a guy with that much passion, I think it should show that he really feels led that he should use his influence in what he views as a positive manner to speak on something that's very strong to him. He's done that several times with, as we've talked about, the Jewish people in Palestine and that issue there. I think that obviously something has struck a chord with him when he sees something wrong. So instead of just getting in your corners and taking your marching orders, whether that be right or left, right or wrong in your eyes, take a second and ask the question, if a head coach who's got other things going on in his life sees enough of an issue, what am I missing? And that can be said on both sides of the equation. The other thing is, in the question of, should they do this? Why does it matter to you? If it's not going to change your life, why are you getting up in arms about it? Why are you getting upset about it? Has there been players and coaches on Auburn staff that have said and done things, promoted certain things that I completely disagree with? It happens every day. That doesn't change how I feel about them as being part of the Auburn family. It makes me have disappointment sometimes for them, or pity for them for not having the full scope of and what I view as a picture of what's going on in that particular situation. But it doesn't change how I feel about them. And I don't feel the need to go out and out them in the middle of a social media platform. So the other aspect I'd like to talk about this too is hypocrisy. And I'm not calling out anyone specifically or even a particular group, but I will say that it is interesting to find that the same people, the same fans, same journalists that went on and on about Brian Harsin choosing not to speak, not to engage more actively about an issue with a certain injection, are the same ones complaining about Bruce Pearl choosing to speak up about this. So in one instance, we've got someone saying you need to be more proactive. But in the second instance, when you got another guy being proactive about something he believes, they need to shut up. And these are also the same people telling people that, how dare you tell an athlete not to speak up about something? How dare you tell a coach not? But when it's not on their side of the equation, and that's not a right or a left issue or a right or a wrong, it's just simply consistency is what I'm asking for. Can everybody share their opinion? Yes, you are allowed that freedom to do so in this country. Should they? It's an honest question to ask, and it's a healthy debate to have. I do think it's one worth having more often. And I do think it's one that Bruce Pearl probably considered before he does these things, because he doesn't do it too often, although he does have a few things he's very passionate about, and I think he has solid reasons behind that. And I'm not even talking about this necessarily this one specific tweet that sparked this conversation today. So I know this is one of those topics that aren't necessarily fun, but I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts on it and how it affects us as the Auburn family. Remember, we pride ourselves on being a family, and doesn't mean we agree with each other all the time. You could ask my brothers. We're family. We love each other. We don't agree with each other all the time, but we still love each other. Yeah, they disappoint me a little bit. A little shout out to them sometimes. but I say that in a loving way. Same thing goes here. Can Bruce Pearl disappoint you with some of his opinions? Sure. But does that change your love for him? Does that change the thankfulness that you have for him here? If it does, maybe you need to check your priorities. Maybe you need to check how you think about things. It's a crazy world out there, folks, and you only have one life one life to live. I suggest that you spend a little less time worrying about other people's opinions and learn about how you can be more helpful yourself as opposed to trying to change what others can. Because sometimes if you live by example, you truly say what you say is what you live out, that's all the difference that needs to make in the world. So that's my opinions right there on that topic. It's a little bit of a hot button topic, but we want to try to cover all things here on the Auburn Family Spectrum. I thank you guys for tuning in today, whether you watched here on YouTube or listened on the audio podcast. Let me know your comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at TigerEye24 or obviously comment below on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed on both formats, if not both, until we talk to you again on Ever the Podcast or Eagle.